Hi everyone, I'm back again with another Synastry chart, this time between Patsy Ramsey and her daughter JonBenét. I've had so many requests for this compatibility chart and I'm finally getting around to it. I've also done the compatibility chart between JonBenét and her dad and also JonBenét and her brother Burke. So if you haven't seen those videos, I suggest you watch those because everything really does tie in together. JonBenét's Venus, Patsy, that's a PNA, and Chiron conjuncts her mother's Hell 2 degrees. This to me means that her mother knew what went on that night, or that morning actually, and was covering things up and was hiding things because that's what the energies of the asteroid Hell represent. JonBenét's Venus and Patsy and Chiron holding hands. This signifies to me that there was a painful relationship with her mother, and it had to do with the love that she felt. It was painful, and there was a cover-up involved here. Patsy's Calliope trines JonBenét's Mercury, 0 degrees, and you can't get tighter than that. Calliope has to do with letter writing. And Mercury is also a planet that has to do with communication. Now, JonBenét's Mercury is in the 4th house that rules the home and the family. So to me, I think that Patsy wrote that letter. That's just my interpretation of this aspect. Patsy's Mira conjuncts JonBenét's IC and Sun, 1 degree. Now, there's a lot of people who think that JonBenét was sexually abused. That asteroid represents sexual manipulation and activities that don't border on normalcy. And since Patsy's Mira is conjuncting JonBenét's IC, this happened behind the scenes because it opposes the midheaven, and it's whatever conjuncture I see happens behind the scenes because it's on the cusp of the 4th house that rules the home and the family. And the midheaven is what you see out in the open. Now, Mira is also conjuncting JonBenét's Sun. And in a natal chart, the Sun represents the father. Now, I'm not saying that Patsy was the one that perpetrated sexual abuse towards JonBenét because the Sun is involved here. However, there is indication of that, and she either knew about it or, like I said before, she covered it up. Her Uranus conjuncts JonBenét's South Node, and this means that there was a very unstable relationship and unpredictability between the two of them. And since it's conjuncting JonBenét's South Node, she felt that it was just normal for her mother to act that way. There was a craziness involved here. And like I said before, if you haven't looked at the other videos with the rest of the family, you should, because this family is really hugely dysfunctional. I mean, families can be dysfunctional, but this is way over the top due to all of the other interpretations that I'm going to explain further. Patsy's Chiron, Damocles and Pholus, and Patsy, again, her PNA, conjuncts JonBenét's Moon and North Node. This is also very telling as well. Whatever conjuncts your North Node from the other person, those energies you will receive, and it will be the basic theme of the relationship for you. So we have Patsy's Chiron conjuncting JonBenét's North Node. That has to do with pain. If this was a painful relationship for JonBenét, and Damocles has to do with a threat hanging over your head. It's like a cloud that's, right before the storm, and it hangs over your head, it looms. And Pholus has to do with an explosion that eventually will happen in this relationship between Patsy and her daughter. And since Chiron is holding hands with Pholus and Patsy, this is where it's coming from. It's right there, written right in the chart. You can't deny it. JonBenét's Uranus conjuncts Patsy's Sun, Astarte, and Deianira. This means to me that JonBenét had a temper. I mean, she was young and she would periodically rebel against her mother's behavior. Since it's conjuncting Patsy's Sun, and Astarte has to do with blow-ups and arguments, and Deianira has to do with victimhood. So JonBenét wasn't like a shrinking violet. She really stood up to her mother and told her what she thought, and I think it had to do with maybe the pageantry, and she didn't want to be portrayed in a way that she wasn't, she didn't want to be. I failed to mention here that the North Node, I have to go back to that because I missed an important aspect in that. Patsy's Chiron is also conjuncting JonBenét's Moon and her North Node. Now, the Moon is a very important luminary in a synastry chart, and since Chiron is conjuncting JonBenét's Moon, this was very emotionally painful for JonBenét in this relationship. JonBenét's Lie conjuncts Patsy's North Node 2 degrees. So the theme of this relationship, one of the basic themes for Patsy was this whole relationship was a lie. For the most part. I mean, she had JonBenét parading around, doing beauty pageants at such a young age, and it was just a facade. It was deceptive. So Patsy's Agamemnon conjuncts JonBenét's descendant 3 degrees, and Agamemnon has to do with a sudden homicide, and the descendant is a very important angle in a compatibility chart. So that's what came into this relationship between the two of them, because Neptune is involved here as well in the planetary department. Neptune is Patsy's Neptune is conjuncting JonBenét's vertex, and that has to do with deception, illusions. The vertex is a very important point in a synastry chart. It's like a second ascendant. So whatever conjuncts your vertex from the other person, you will receive those energies. Patsy's Jupiter, finale, Apophis, conjuncts JonBenét's Nessus, Iphigenia, and Xanthopy. The further I get into this chart, everything starts to tie in together, and it's starting to make sense to me. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, and it magnifies the energies of whatever it conjuncts. So Patsy's Jupiter in finale, finale has to do with endings, and it's conjuncting Apophis, which has to do with destruction and chaos. Now, Jupiter holding hands with finale and Apophis, conjuncting JonBenét's Nessus, that has to do with abuse, always. And Iphigenia, sacrifice, another asteroid that has the energy of death and endings. Usually with Iphigenia, this had to do with, in Greek mythology, it correlates with the parents, specifically the father. Also has to do with subservience. Now, Patsy's Jupiter also conjuncts JonBenét's Xanthopy, and Xanthopy has to do with domestic abuse. So again, she did not have a very good home life, obviously, but a lot of this really, I think a lot of the issues with her death really tied into the whole family situation. Now, Patsy's Pare, that's a medical asteroid, and it has to do with head injuries or injuries that happen above the neckline. And it conjuncts JonBenét's vertex as well, 2 degrees. Like I said before, Neptune is there. Again, illusions, deception, and possible cover-ups. JonBenét's Vallon conjuncts Patsy's South Node 1 degree, and JonBenét's Mars conjuncts Patsy's Vallon 0 degrees. And Vallon has to do with camouflage, misrepresentation, not seeing someone for what they really are, or the situation is foggy. It's kind of like Neptune. And since it's conjuncting Patsy's South Node at 1 degree, Patsy, she knew what was going on. She perpetrated this whole camouflage of the actual reality of what went on in the family and between her and her daughter. And since JonBenét's Mars is conjuncting Patsy's Vallon, this perpetrated this energy, because Mars is like, it has fire and power to it. It's the lower octave of Pluto, and it's also a war planet, and it brings fire and power to this asteroid. And this is at 0 degrees, so this is huge. Now, Patsy's Pluto squares JonBenét's ascendant 0 degrees. Power struggles. Behind the scenes, there's a square, and it's a friction that can't be resolved, and Patsy had a lot of power over JonBenét, and ultimately, I think she knew what happened, but she's not around anymore, and she passed, so she took all of that information to her grave. But this Synastry chart really spells out a lot of details of what happened, I think. So that's all I have, and I hope you enjoyed this interpretation, and I will be back soon. So if you're interested, hit the subscribe button, and have a nice day.